Should you buy now or should you wait? A common mindset right now is to wait until interest rates come down and for prices to drop. The news is everywhere about home prices dropping dramatically across the country. And I totally get it. The rates and home prices are crazy right now, which is making payments crazy. But the answer to this question is not clear cut. There are pros and cons to waiting, and that's what we're going to talk about today. In a perfect world, having low interest rates and low home prices would be ideal, but that is not how the real estate market works. Interest rates are affected by inflation. Home prices are affected by buyer demand. Typically, when you have higher inflation, that will push interest rates up. Lower inflation, and that'll push downward on interest rates. However, it's not parallel when it comes to the home prices. When you have rising inflation, you typically have less home affordability. And when you have less home affordability, fewer home buyers will be entering into the market, and that will have downward pressure on the home prices. When you have lower inflation, that creates downward pressure on interest rates, which creates more home affordability. When you have higher home affordability, that increases the number of buyers that come into the market. And the more buyers that come into the market increases demand, and higher demand pushes up home prices. We saw this in 2020. As interest rates fell, it created more home affordability. You could buy a lot more house in 2020, even as home prices increased. Because the interest rates were lower, a buyer could get more for their money. And that brought more buyers in, which created more stress on the inventory, which created more demand and pushed prices up. But where are we right now? It's hard to differentiate between what's happening in the country and what's happening locally. It's important to separate the two. What's happening in hotspots like California, Texas, Arizona, those areas may not be the same as where we are locally here in Massachusetts, specifically the South Coast. So if we look at the number of homes that are on the market now versus a year ago, there are 82 homes on the market now versus 40 on the market last year. So that's definitely an increase of 105%. Now, because of buyer demand, we have seen a downward pressure on home affordability and a decrease in buyer demand. That is causing homes to stay on the market longer. Now, if we look at how many price changes there's been now versus last year, we're looking at 169 versus 111. That's a 52% increase in the number of price changes. Now, it's super important to not jump to the conclusion that just because there's a price change, that means that the bottom is falling out on pricing. A lot of sellers have been late or haven't adjusted to the current market conditions. So when they're putting their home on the market, they might be looking at comparable properties from 6 months ago, 9 months ago, when the market was much stronger, interest rates were lower, demand was higher, and they're looking at those prices and saying, okay, based on those numbers, my house should be worth this. But in reality, the market has changed, and that house isn't worth what it was worth 6, 9 months ago. So if you put it on the market based on those numbers, you will have to do a price change. So those price changes don't tell us the whole story on whether the bottom is falling out of the market in Plymouth. What does tell us a better picture, though, is what the median sale price is. Now, if we look at the median sale price now versus last year, right now we're sitting at $580,000 is the median sale price in Plymouth versus $500 last year. That's a 16% increase a year over the last 12 months. So what that tells us is that the market is still strong. The market is still appreciating. I'm seeing that when I look at the day-to-day homes that are sold, what they listed for, what they sold for, and I don't look at what they originally were listed for. I look at what it was listed for when an offer was accepted. That is the correct market value. When you have a house that has had multiple price changes, that doesn't necessarily reflect, of the market correction. That may be a seller that didn't price it properly to begin with. So to really understand where we are now in the market, we need to go back even further in history, not just a year, because a year ago the market was very, very hot. We need to go back before the surge, before things got crazy, before the interest rates dropped, which increased buyer demand. So if we go back to 2019 and look at the median sale price in the town of Plymouth in 2019, just 3 years ago, was $380,000. $398,000. $398,000 compared to $580,000 now. That is a 30% appreciation in value over the course of 3 years. Now, 30% appreciation between 2019 and 2022 right now, what that does is it gives you perspective. It gives us perspective in the sense that if we see and hear that values are dropping 4%, 5%, 10% versus a year ago, 10% versus 6 months ago. So what we do is we look at that big picture and we say, okay, well, great, it'll adjust 5%, 10%, but that's still 20% appreciation over the course of the last 3 years. So a lot of people are doom and gloom and, oh my gosh, it's going to, drop 5%, 10%. So even if you bought a house in 2021, last year, for $500,000, today's value is $580,000. So what if the market drops? What if you lose 10%, which is aggressive based on the data that we're seeing right now in Plymouth and Plymouth County? But just say worst case scenario, things get out of control and it does drop 10%. 10% would equal a $58,000 drop in your equity. The thing of it is you have $80,000. So you have $80,000 in equity minus your depreciation of $58,000. That leaves you still with positive equity of $22,000. The thing to remember is that $22,000 is not real money. It is only real money if you are looking to sell right away or pull an equity line of credit out of the house. As the house just sits there, it's not real tangible money that you're losing out of your pocket. Homeownership is a long-term investment. Unless you're an investor and you're looking to buy a property, sell it within a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you're looking to get that money back quickly, unless you are looking to do that quick turnaround, this whole situation really isn't going to affect you because eventually we will be out of the recession. And if you look at the last 50 years of the real estate cycle goes up, it goes down, it goes back up again. So it's just like the stock market. If you wait long enough, it will rebound. Now, I wanted to touch on real quick Plymouth County. Now, Plymouth County covers, everything from Wareham over to Lakeville, Middleborough, the Bridgewaters, Pembroke, Hanson, Halifax, Duxbury, up to Hanover, Norwell, Hingham area. All of the South Coast is in that Plymouth County area. If we look at the median sale price for the entire Plymouth County, it's sitting at $560,000 versus $505,000. That's up 28% over 2019. Inventory is up versus last year, 669 homes on the market versus 390 homes a year ago. And they're also seeing plenty of price changes, 1,317 price changes versus 989. Again, the price changes are up 33%, but that doesn't tell us the whole story because appreciation is up 10.89%. So on a whole, Plymouth County is still doing well. It feels different because we are feeling seasonal change. We finally have seasonality back in the market. The last 2 years, we had absolutely no seasonality. So typically what we see is a surge in home prices and activity in the spring. We have homeowners that have waited all winter. Things are starting to look nice. Flowers are blooming, so they get their house ready and put it on the market. And as we get more inventory, we have buyers that maybe took a break during the winter, and they're going to come back out and start their search again because there's more inventory to choose from. That is a seasonal event that happens pretty much every year in a normal real estate market. So we have a big jump in the spring. We have a little bit of a drop in the summer. People are taking a break, going on summer vacations, kids are out of school. So maybe they'll take a break and say, we're not going to list the house because of the kids, or we're going to be out of town, so we're not going to look at homes to buy. So it's common to see a dip, during the summer months, typically July, early August. But then as we get into fall, the kids are going back into school, people are getting back into their normal routines, we typically see a little bit of a surge in the fall. Not as much as the spring, but it is a little bit of a surge. And then now, middle of November is where we start seeing getting ready for the holidays and settling into the winter. And it typically does get quiet. This is the quietest time of the year for the real estate market from now until about the middle of January. With the holidays, winter's coming, people are getting ready. So maybe sellers will say they'll take a break, put their houses on the market. They'll hold off, until after the holidays. So we always see a seasonal slowdown this time of year. It's not because of the market conditions or inflation or interest rates. It is simply a seasonal slowdown. And then the next part, depending on what the winter looks like, if we have a warm winter, sometimes we have an earlier spring market, but once we get through the winter, we get into February, things start to ramp up again, getting ready for that spring market. Now, one thing I want to make very, very clear. You might be sitting there saying, oh, she's a real estate agent. She just wants to sell more homes. She's taking the data and she's making it look more appealing so she can have more sales. I am not pro real estate sales. I am pro ownership. I very much believe in the value of owning a home. I firmly believe that owning a home versus renting, it is the single best way to build wealth in this country. And it's also the best way to hedge against inflation. You have a home that you're locked in on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, that payment will not change. Even though prices on everything else are going to go up, gas, groceries, everything, rent will continue to rise. Your mortgage, when you're locked in on a mortgage, that's never going to change. And as that changes, as the market changes, and whether it goes up or goes down, it'll eventually go back up again, you will build equity. There are definitely pros to waiting. One of those be that interest rates might be lower. There's a good chance that interest rates are going to drop next year. A lot of the leading economic predictors are calling for an decrease in interest rates. Eventually, we will have downward pressure on the recession, which means interest rates will come down. So there's definitely a potential for lower rates. There's also the potential for more inventory. Right now, the inventory is still very low. Right now versus 2019, the inventory is actually down 65% in Plymouth and 51% for all of Plymouth County. So inventory is incredibly low. Even though homes are staying on the market longer, there is still a huge deficit in inventory. And waiting very well could open it up, give you more options and more inventory to choose from. It might be also more affordable depending on your situation. Again, it is not a blanket statement. If you are living at home, if you're living rent-free, if you're in a situation where you don't have to move and you could potentially save more money, you could wait until those interest rates go down. It could be financially advantageous to wait. Now, again, waiting might result in lower interest rates. It might result in lower prices, but you will not get lower interest rates and lower prices at the same time. Based on what I talked about earlier, having those two come together economically just don't work. The reasons for those individually when they happen are separate. They're not the same reasons. So you have to make a choice whether you want to get into that interest rate, that low interest rate, or capitalize on the low home price. Now, what are some of the reasons that you may not want to wait? If you are renting, I would say seriously consider looking and moving earlier than later. And the reason being is that the trajectory of rents here and across the country are doing nothing but going up. When you're renting, you're missing out on forced savings. So every time you make a mortgage payment, you're paying down that principal, which in turn is building you equity. The other con of waiting is that interest rates could go higher. We don't know what interest rates are going to do heading into 2023, and the rates could go higher. Now, typically, the best time to buy a house is ideally when the home prices are at their lowest, regardless of where the interest rate is. And the reason being is you cannot change that home price, but you can always refinance the interest rate. If the interest rate drops, not a guarantee, but if it does, you can refinance. Now, there are ways you can get that lower interest rate now through some creative negotiation. Because the market has changed, sellers are willing to negotiate a little bit further. So you could actually negotiate in the seller paying for a buy down on the rate, either a buy down over the course of the 30 years, or a little bit more aggressively, you could do a 2-1 buy down where the interest rate is actually bought down 2% the first year, 1% the second year, and then it stays at that original rate for years 3 to 30. The biggest word of caution is for all the people that are waiting for prices to drop, and in the meantime, the interest rates are going up. For example, if you bought a $500,000 home and you put 20% down at an interest rate of 6.854%, your payment would be $3,239. Now, let's look at the scenario if the prices dropped 5% and the house is now only worth $475,000. At 20% down, with the interest rates continuing to rise, the interest rate is now 7.75%. Your payment is now $3,339. That's a difference of $100 a month. Even though the value of the house dropped $25,000, you're now paying $100 more a month because the interest rates went up. Everyone's situation is unique. It is not black and white on whether now is a good time to buy or whether you should wait. My goal is to not get you to buy, but rather to give you the information that you will need to determine if it's the right time for you to buy. Now, if you are thinking about moving to the Plymouth area and you're going through the research and figuring out your finances on whether now is a good time to make a move, check out my video on the cost of living in Plymouth for a full breakdown on what it actually costs to live in the town of Plymouth. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.